밥은 먹었어요?
The drama opens by introducing the life of No In-ji, a woman who works for a contract marriage service provider called NM. Recently, In-ji just completed her 4th marriage contract with a man who was critically ill and eventually passed away. Her task ended there, and she handed the man over to his guardian. Just a few days later, In-ji receives a new offer for another contract marriage. According to her superior at NM, this will be an unusual contract marriage offer. She will become the partner of Han Jong-won, a music producer whose life is currently falling apart. Rumors circulating about him suggest that Jong-won divorced his wife due to drug addiction. This new relationship, 5 months later, will drag them both into a whirlwind of major problems and a criminal mystery. Before deciding to enter the contract marriage, Jong-won already had mental health issues that led to his divorce. However, the separation from his ex-wife has recently triggered Jong-won's behavior to worsen under the influence of medication. Jong-won often spends time at clubs and returns home in an unconscious state. As a result, his manager has to go through the trouble of taking care of him and suppressing all the bad news so it doesn't reach the public and ruin Jong-won's career. The morning after getting drunk at the club, Jong-won is seen contacting someone saved in his contacts as wife. It seems the divorce that people talk about has become something too complicated for others to understand. Jong-won even still communicates with his ex-wife to discuss issues regarding the house he occupies. He complains about a luxury chandelier in the living room that he dislikes completely. Actually, Jong-won is used to luxury, but it seems the memory attached to that chandelier is connected to his father and disturbs his peace of mind, so he hopes to get rid of it. However, his ex-wife always forbids it and promises to replace it after she returns from France.
적당한 거 찾고 있으니까 기다려. 건들지 마.
그래서 더 싫다고.
명이 아니라 작품이야. 아버님이 아끼시던 거잖아.
That day, as Jong-won left the house driving his Ferrari to go to work, almost at the same time, In-ji entered his house carrying a suitcase. She entered the house smoothly, as if it were her own home, then cleaned herself up and put on a wedding ring. Meanwhile, Jong-won went through an increasingly bad day with various misunderstandings, culminating in him being suspected by the police due to a mistake made by one of his colleagues while they were at a club. Jong-won's life became even more pressured. Moreover, it turned out that it was his ex-wife who requested Jong-won to undergo the contract marriage, so that Jong-won would not disturb her life anymore, as she already had a new husband. Now, his ex-wife looks happy with her new husband. This is in stark contrast to Jong-won, who is heavily dependent on his ex-wife, to the point of constantly intruding on her life. That night, Jong-won even smashed his ex-wife's car, which led to him being arrested by the police. That was when In-ji arrived and claimed to be Jong-won's wife to take him home. This became their first meeting, which seemed very awkward for Jong-won. Indeed, he was not yet used to In-ji's presence in his life, even seeming to reject her existence and the friendliness shown by In-ji. Nevertheless, he still allowed her to stay in the house until their marriage contract was finished. These two strangers then lived in the same house, carrying their respective traumas and big secrets that only they understood. In-ji herself seemed to pursue the job as a paid wife just because she wanted to avoid a man who had been treated in a mental hospital all this time. However, she received news from her friend that the man was already roaming free. So In-ji started to be alert and a bit scared, although she might be safe living in Jong-won's house, which is very luxurious, large, and appears very closed off and isolated. Meanwhile, Jong-won, who carries severe trauma from his parents' past issues, begins to open up, even though he hasn't fully accepted In-ji's presence yet. He treats In-ji more kindly by having dinner together at home. However, In-ji's presence starts to feel like a disturbance. Jong-won, who suffers from insomnia, is disturbed one night by In-ji watching a soccer match. In fact, it is difficult for Jong-won to sleep at those hours. He even relies on sleeping pills to fall asleep soundly. Jong-won comes out of his room to protest, but In-ji responds casually. Instead, she invites Jong-won to watch with her, then goes downstairs to get a beer. Jong-won continues to protest, even telling In-ji to just live somewhere else so he can live in peace for the year. However, Inji refuses. The situation leads Inji to tell Jongwon that he is allowed to be himself in front of her, so they can build comfort until this 1-year period passes. Those words actually cause Jongwon to immediately throw a beer can at the luxury chandelier he has hated all this time. When Jongwon tries to retrieve the beer can, he threw. Parts of the chandelier shatter and fall, nearly hitting him. But unexpectedly, Inji protects Jongwon from the falling debris, injuring her hand in the process. Naturally, this action shocks Jongwon, as he didn't expect Inji to make such a sacrifice. Then, the story suddenly shifts to the future, specifically 5 months later. At that time, Jongwon is summoned to the police station. It turns out that 5 months later, Inji disappeared without a trace. Only her trunk was found floating in a lake. Because of this, Jongwon is questioned by the police that day, as he is suspected of being involved in Inji's disappearance. Then, the story shifts to recount Inji's past. Previously, Inji had a normal relationship with a man named Seo Do-ha. They had even planned to get married, but then rumors circulated on the internet and at Do-ha's office claiming that she was hypersexual and involved in contract marriage cases. Embarrassed, Do-ha finally disappeared from Inji's life, just 10 days before their wedding. This event happened 5 years ago. Since that moment, Inji's life hit rock bottom. She kept waiting for Do-ha to return, even looking after the apartment they lived in together for years later. When Inji went to handle the cancellation of her wedding with Do-ha at the WL office, her chosen event organizer, she met Lee Seon, the vice CEO of the company. Lee Seon offered Inji a job at NM, another branch of WL that provides 1-year contract marriage services. At first, Inji was hesitant to accept it, but in her condition at the time, she needed an outlet for her failed marriage. The offer given by Lee Seon, along with all the benefits she would receive, seemed attractive to her. And finally, that is how Inji ended up where she is today, becoming someone living a temporary marriage and eventually meeting Jongwon. Back to the present. After Inji saved Jongwon, a worried Jongwon took Inji to the hospital to get her wound treated. It happened to be the nearest hospital where Jongwon's father was also being treated. 2 doctors who knew Jongwon approached him and offered to let him see his father's condition. But Jongwon firmly refused. He told them to only notify him if his father had passed away. It appears that Jongwon no longer cares about his father. Others who don't know might consider Jongwon an unfilial son. But in reality, Jongwon is simply trying to save himself from the deep psychological wounds inflicted by his father in the past. Then, even though it was getting late, after Inji finished her treatment, they went to eat at a nearby fast food restaurant. There, the 2 of them tried to get closer by chatting more. Eventually, Inji asked why Jongwon hated the living room chandelier so much, but Jongwon seemed unwilling to discuss or talk about it, leaving Inji to eat alone. Finally, they returned home. Not long after that, Jongwon was still openly avoiding the luxury chandelier in his house. That light always reminded him of the wounds of his past, about his mother being abused by his own father, about a home that was never peaceful, and everything that hurt Jongwon whenever he remembered it. Inji's presence seemed to force him to face those wounds more realistically. But Jongwon did not blame her at all. Instead, he began to respect Inji and tried to adapt to her presence, as she now held the status of his wife. Although their marriage was only a pretense, it was officially recorded. Jongwon now acknowledged Inji as his wife in front of his friends. He even told the story of Inji protecting him when the chandelier fell in his house. This story eventually reached Seo Yeon, his ex-wife. She began to feel angry and jealous, especially after Jongwon stated in a message that he was worried about Inji. Later, Jongwon even begins to open up about his past regarding the chandelier in the house that he hates. Jongwon explains that his father used to install a camera in that light to watch his mother. That is the reason why Jongwon always avoids lights and surveillance cameras. Jongwon's mother went mad due to his father's harsh treatment, but she was never taken to a hospital out of fear of social judgment. Young Jongwon, filled with worry, ended up watching his mother all night long because he was terrified she would end her own life or even kill his father. After feeling relieved from telling the story, Jong-won, who looked tired, finally fell asleep on the sofa. This was the first time Jong-won could sleep peacefully without taking medication. In-ji treated the wound on Jong-won's forehead, then answered a call from Seo-yeon on Jong-won's phone. Seo-yeon reported that Jong-won's father's health had worsened, but he had passed the critical stage. In-ji did not wake Jong-won up, but told him later. The next morning after Jong-won woke up, In-ji suggested that Jong-won visit his father to check on his condition. Jong-won accepted the suggestion, but he seemed to have a desire to kill his own father, which In-ji initially supported if Jong-won really wanted to do it. However, Jong-won refused and instead invited In-ji to go for lunch together at a restaurant. They discussed Seo-yeon contacting Jong-won's number last night. This made Jong-won feel uncomfortable because In-ji was the one bringing it up, especially when In-ji said that Jong-won seemed very obedient to Seo-yeon and was under her control. Those words made Jong-won realize his mistake in allowing Seo-yeon to treat him however she pleased. Finally, because of In-ji's words, that day Jong-won decided to meet Seo-yeon only to thank her for troubling herself to check on his father when the hospital called. Meanwhile, In-ji's close friend, Si-jong, is worried about In-ji because he discovered that Tae-song, a man who likes In-ji and constantly stalks her, has been released from the mental hospital. He mentioned this to Do-dam, In-ji's neighbour and another close friend, who is trusted to look after In-ji's apartment. However, unexpectedly, Do-dam seems to be harbouring another secret. After Si-jong left the apartment, she contacted someone to inform them that Tae-song had returned. Tae-song is then seen at Seo-yeon's mother's house because he is set to become a fencing instructor. Seo-yeon seems slightly interested in him, but clearly she is far more obsessed with Jong-won, who is now slipping out of her control after entering the contract marriage with In-ji. Lately, Jong-won's attitude has indeed changed, despite receiving an anonymous message warning him to be careful of In-ji. However, Jong-won did not pay much attention to it. For Jong-won, In-ji's presence has actually saved his life and brought a new atmosphere. He has even begun to live a more regular life, coming home before dinner time to eat with In-ji. This is something he likely never did when he was with Seo-yeon. The situation in the past did not allow for it due to many life pressures. Not to mention that Seo-yeon chose to abort the pregnancy from her marriage with Jong-won because she was worried about her own life. But now, Seo-yeon wants her place back as Jong-won's wife. During Seo-yeon's visit to Jong-won's house, she had a chat with In-ji. Their conversation made Seo-yeon realize that In-ji had actually known Seo-yeon and Jong-won for a long time. It turns out they went to the same school in the past, but In-ji was one grade below them. When leaving, Seo-yeon told Jong-won about this, but Jong-won did not react much to it. He went straight into the house, only to find In-ji dressed up and intending to leave. Initially, Jong-won thought In-ji wanted to go to the hospital, but In-ji immediately refused a ride, stating she had personal business. It turned out In-ji wanted to meet In-young, the woman who had been helping her track down Do-ha after he disappeared and abandoned In-ji. The latest news is that he is currently in Budapest. In-ji herself does not yet know what her goal is in chasing Do-ha all this time, other than to take revenge for her heartbreak. Meanwhile, Seo-yeon tried to tempt Jong-won again by bringing up the past when she had a miscarriage with their baby. In reality, Seo-yeon had intentionally aborted the baby because she wanted to make Jong-won feel guilty and distressed over losing the child he so deeply desired. The conversation about their baby clearly made Jong-won anxious again. In-ji, who had arrived home, witnessed this and decided not to disturb Jong-won. The next day, they went together to the hospital to remove the stitches on In-ji's injured hand. The activity at the hospital, which caused Jong-won to see the wound and interact with the CCTV in the elevator, made him very uncomfortable and extremely anxious. In-ji even had to calm him down and distract Jong-won so he wouldn't be anxious anymore. They then proceeded to the hospital's administration section. Jong-won, feeling responsible for Inji's injury, wanted her to recover fully and scheduled plastic surgery to remove the scar on her hand. On another day, because he was too busy taking care of Inji, Jong-won ignored calls from Seo-yeon. He even seemed to forget their appointment to meet, because the night before, Jong-won said he wanted to pick up a vinyl album and the last ultrasound photo of his baby. On his way home, Jong-won did not contact Seo-yeon at all. Instead, he was surprised by Inji's request to officiate their marriage 2 days later. The next day, amidst the busyness of arranging the marriage, Jong-won finally found time to meet Seo-yeon to pick up the vinyl and ultrasound photo. At that time, it was clear that Seo-yeon was jealous of the closeness between Jong-won and Inji, especially after knowing they would officiate the marriage, even though it was actually just a procedure that had to be followed in the contract marriage they were undergoing. They will not be recorded or bound by law. The ceremony is only to affirm their contract in the fake marriage. One witness from Jong-won's side was presented. He chose to call Jun-chul, his manager, as a witness. The contract will only last for a year. They can extend it with the agreement of both parties. But if one disagrees, then Inji will lose contact with Jong-won. After they sign the agreement, the fake marriage truly began. That night, Jong-won questioned the reason why Inji wanted to take this job and what her previous profession was, but Inji refused to explain and tell him everything. Instead, she said that she was only doing her duty to accompany people who feel lonely, making them think that they are no longer lonely. Although in reality, when they part ways later, that loneliness will become even more real. Jong-won was slightly offended when referred to as one of those lonely men and decided to end the conversation. He returned to his room, looking at the ultrasound photo of his baby and the 3 blue abortion pills that Seo-yeon had intentionally stuck behind the photo. That night, Jong-won had a nightmare again. It felt like falling into water that might drown him. He almost took the pill hidden behind the photo, but changed his mind and immediately went to the bathroom to get the sleeping pills he kept. After taking his sleeping pills, Jong-won calmed down a bit, especially when he heard Inji's voice trying to soothe his anxiety. At first, Jong-won thought he was just hallucinating. But the next morning, while they were having breakfast together, Inji admitted that she indeed comforted Jong-won last night. According to the rules in the contract, after officiating the marriage, they are to sleep in the same room unless there are other special reasons such as illness or otherwise. Jong-won seemed unable to accept this because he is uncomfortable having someone else in his room. He was furious and wanted that rule not to be enforced. Although Inji looked confused, she still tried to accommodate Jong-won's wish. When Jong-won went to work, Inji took photos of Jong-won's medications to ensure the safety of the drugs according to the labels and to know their functions. She also went back to her apartment and met Do-dam, who questioned why Inji was still taking care of the apartment, even cooking as if Do-ha would return. Inji simply replied that she just didn't like the apartment looking empty. On the same day, Tae-song, who was employed at Seo-yeon's mother's house, was seen teaching a cake decorating class. He interacted more frequently with Seo-yeon, who attended the classes provided by her mother. Although Seo-yeon seemed to ignore him, his presence was indeed very suspicious. Especially a few months later, a question arises. Could Tae-song be involved in the crime, where an unidentified body was found inside a trunk belonging to Jong-won? Of course, these are the questions that will eventually be answered. That body could be anyone. It could be Inji or someone else. Lately, Inji has indeed been meeting more frequently with Seo-yeon, who still interferes in Jong-won's life. She can show up for various reasons. One of them, of course, was already planned, replacing the grand chandelier in Jong-won's house, which has always made Jong-won anxious because of the trauma attached to it. Even after replacing the light, Seo-yeon still asked Inji to allow her to have dinner with Jong-won and Inji, under the pretext of celebrating their marriage. Inji agreed without asking Jong-won first. After all, she knew Jong-won would not be angry. In the middle of their conversation, Kang Yoon-ah, a close friend of Seo-yeon, appeared bringing rice cakes she ordered from Tae-song as an introductory gift for Inji. The decoration on the cake immediately reminded Inji of Tae-song, who had been following her for a very long time. Nevertheless, she said nothing when she saw it, and still accepted it. That night, when it was time to sleep, Jong-won was suddenly surprised because Inji indeed did not move out of his room, but added a new mattress for him. That way, they did not violate the applicable contract rules. Before going to sleep, they chatted briefly about the light that had finally been removed. At that time, Inji said that the light should have been sold to a scrap dealer for a cheap price so that Jong-won would think of and remember it only as cheap scrap metal. Nothing more. No bad experiences and so on. Not something that instills fear in his heart. The next night,
Keesokan
the
malamnya,
dinner
makan
together
malam
actually
bersama
took
itu
place.
benar-benar terjadi.
Seo-yeon
Suyeon juga
also
membawa
brought her
pasangan
contract
kontraknya
partner named
bernama
Yoon Jo.
Ji-oh. Tapi
However,
dia tetap
she
terlihat
still
lebih
appeared
mesra
more
dengan
affectionate
Jong-won
with
jika
Jong-won
dibanding dengan
compared to
pasangan
her new
barunya
partner.
itu. Inji yang berada di
Inji,
tengah-tengah mereka
observing
hanya
from the
melihat
middle,
situasi itu
found the
dengan
situation
lucu karena
amusing,
pikirnya
thinking that
semua
everything looked
terlihat
very
sangat
awkward
awkward
due
dengan
to
perlakuan
Seo-yeon's
Suyeon itu.
behavior.
Apalagi setelah makan
Especially
malam,
after dinner,
Suyeon justru
Seo-yeon
membahas lampu mewah
intentionally
yang
brought up
sudah
the luxury
disingkirkan dari
chandelier
rumah
that had been
tersebut,
removed from the
membuat
house,
Jong-won
making
gelisah lagi
Jong-won
karena
anxious
kepikiran.
again as it weighed on his
Beruntung,
mind.
Inji dengan berani
Fortunately,
mengatasi
Inji
situasi
bravely handled the
tersebut dengan
situation by
bilang
stating
kalau
that the
lampu tua
old
itu
light
hanyalah
was
sampah
merely
yang harusnya
trash
dijual ke
that
tukang
should have been
rongsokan.
sold to a scrap
Inji pun di
dealer.
situ membela
Inji
Jong-won
stood up
dengan
for
bilang
Jong-won
kepada
there,
Suyeon
telling
kalau
Seo-yeon
Suyeon
that she
seharusnya
should
tidak
not touch
menyinggung
upon
luka-luka
Jong-won's
lama
old
lagi
wounds
yang
anymore,
ada pada
and to stop
Jong-won
doing so
dan
if she
berhenti
didn't want
untuk
those
melakukan
wounds to
itu
be
jika
disturbed.
memang dia lukanya tak
Inji
ingin
then ended
terusik.
the conversation
Pembicaraan
by
mereka pun
subtly kicking
disudahi oleh
Seo-yeon
Inji yang
and
secara
Yoon Jo
halus
out, so
mengusir
they would
Suyeon
leave
dan Ji-oh
immediately.
supaya segera pulang.
Naturally, Inji's actions made Seo-yeon even more annoyed. After Seo-yeon left, Jong-won thanked Inji directly. It was evident there that Jong-won was trying to get closer to Inji. They even spent the night trying to dance together. Inji used to be an expert dancer in the past, but soon the dance turned into warm intimacy. Unbeknownst to them, inside the newly installed light, Seo-yeon had secretly planted a CCTV camera to watch them. The story shifts to 5 years ago, before Inji got involved in the job of a paid bride. Actually, Inji already knew that Do-ha was a bisexual who also liked men, but Inji still wanted to marry him, even though it was not approved by her mother. Inji did not even mind if Do-ha wanted to leave her after 40 years of marriage, if Do-ha wanted to be with another man for the rest of his life. Do-ha always felt lonely, but Inji promised to help overcome that loneliness if Do-ha was willing to marry her. Inji had forgotten those memories for a very long time, but her intimacy with Jong-won last night reminded her again of her lover who disappeared. Meanwhile, Jong-won unknowingly begins to develop feelings for Inji. He even hopes to get closer to Inji. This will certainly trigger big problems later, because Seo-yeon has not actually let go of Jong-won to be with another woman, even though she was the one who asked Jong-won to remarry. At home, Inji figures out that the medications Jong-won is consuming are making him addicted, but she realizes it is not Jong-won's fault because Seo-yeon has been managing them all this time. Suspicion grows. Inji is convinced that Seo-yeon indeed wants to destroy Jong-won, and she soon realizes that there is a CCTV in the light installed by Seo-yeon. When Inji inspects the rest of the house further, she is shocked to find a gun hidden on a bookshelf. The object makes her anxious because she suddenly remembers Tae-song, so she decides to meet Si-jong to discuss her fears. Since Tae-song has not been seen for a long time, it is possible he is planning something terrible. Amidst that anxiety, Inji says that perhaps she should already plan the end of this fake marriage by creating a perfect divorce for Jong-won. However, something unexpected suddenly happens. Yoon Jo suddenly approaches her and asks Inji to cooperate. Since he does not want Seo-yeon to return to Jong-won, he will support Inji in making Jong-won pay attention only to her. Jong-won has indeed started to accept Inji into his life. The man who is used to being alone has started to open his heart, especially since Inji has really helped him fight the trauma he has. That day, when Jong-won invites Inji to dinner, Inji arranges for them to have dinner in Jong-won's father's hospital room. With a soft voice, Inji says that she will support Jong-won in exacting his revenge and will kill his father for Jong-won. But Jong-won must help Inji too, which is to kill her mother. The offer shocks Jong-won at that moment, but he considers agreeing to it, especially after Jong-won learns that In-ji also hates her mother very much for destroying her marriage and ruining her life. After learning about each other's pasts, the two of them become even closer. They even start sharing many things. Meanwhile, Seo-yeon, who keeps watching their togetherness, burns with jealousy more than ever. Days passed. In-ji continued to do her duty while hoping for Do-ha to return so they could be together again. In-ji missed her former lover very much. One day, Jong-won invited In-ji to watch a movie at the cinema. He ignored an invitation for lunch with Seo-yeon and only appeared polite when saying he would make time the following day. This caused Seo-yeon's jealousy to peak. When she returned home, Seo-yeon kept staring at her monitor screen, displaying the CCTV in Jong-won's house. On the way home from the cinema, Jong-won told In-ji that he wanted to sleep with her, perhaps because he started developing feelings for her and began to like her. In-ji was confused about how to respond, but she smiled at Jong-won's honest words. They returned home peacefully. Meanwhile, Seo-yeon was going crazy because she felt she was losing control over Jong-won. She thought of another way, this time trying to control In-ji and destroy her mental state. In-ji was actually not an easy opponent for Seo-yeon, but it seemed Seo-yeon's manipulative actions were strong enough to affect In-ji. As a result, In-ji started having nightmares related to Seo-yeon and Jong-won. Unable to accept the situation, In-ji thought of retaliation. Knowing that Seo-yeon had placed CCTVs at various points in Jong-won's house, In-ji decided to settle the score by showing off her intimacy with Jong-won in front of those CCTVs until Seo-yeon could no longer hold back her anger. In-ji went to sleep after that, but she kept having nightmares until Jong-won started worrying about her. In-ji's phone lit up that night. There were several incoming messages that caught Jong-won's attention because they contained warnings about Tae-song starting to come to In-ji's apartment. After In-ji woke up, Jong-won asked about Tae-song and offered to help In-ji handle him. However, In-ji refused the help because the rule was that Jong-won was not allowed to interfere in her private life. Meanwhile, Tae-song was seen meeting Seo-yeon. They are indeed connected through work now. Tae-song intentionally met Seo-yeon to warn her not to disturb In-ji. It was as if Tae-song wanted to emphasize that only he was allowed to do that to In-ji. Before leaving, Tae-song even issued a threat if Seo-yeon dared to cross his line. Tae-song's presence apparently pressured Seo-yeon. She felt she would not be able to fight against Tae-song. This turned out to affect her health, which was already poor. Not long after the meeting with Tae-song, Seo-yeon finally fell ill. She was hospitalized due to a problem with her uterus and had to undergo surgery to remove an ovary. Yoon-ah initially contacted Jong-won to accompany Seo-yeon at the hospital, but since his phone was left at home, In-ji arrived first. Seeing her lying sick, In-ji showed no pity at all. Instead, she asked Seo-yeon not to interfere in her business with Jong-won. Toward noon, Jong-won, who had just finished fishing, finally came to visit Seo-yeon after getting news from his manager. Upon entering the ward, Seo-yeon explained her condition and discussed that she did not want to have children anymore. Then she reminded Jong-won regarding the death of their child. Seo-yeon said angrily that someone like Jong-won did not deserve to have children because Jong-won was very selfish. Those words triggered Jong-won's anxiety disorder to return. He remembered that he was a selfish person. Jong-won tried to hold it in until he got out of the hospital. Upon arriving home, Jong-won still had to deal with another problem: Tae-song's presence. He decided to invite the man inside the house to discuss the issue, asking Tae-song not to disturb In-ji anymore if he didn't want his life destroyed. Jong-won, who has a lot of money, is indeed capable of buying the power to destroy Tae-song's life easily. However, Jong-won felt the need to talk to Tae-song nicely first, before deciding what steps to take in dealing with the man. Actually, Inji was very uncomfortable with the presence of the man who had been stalking her for so long being inside the house and in the same room as her. Inji became anxious. She even secretly took the gun hidden on the bookshelf just in case. While Inji was inside, Yong-won nearly beat up Tae-song, who provoked his emotions and revealed that he had information that Yong-won himself killed his mother. If this were to be known by others, it could lead to Jong-won being suspected by the police in the future, because the body that would later be found, and initially had no identity, turned out to actually be Tae-song's body. The conflict between them could give rise to well-founded suspicion. However, that night, it seemed Tae-song did manage to leave Jong-won's house alive after receiving threats. After Tae-song left, only he and In-ji remained in Jong-won's grand house. The two of them chatted about Jong-won's desire to have a child, as well as his past issues with Seo-yeon. Jong-won was convinced that Seo-yeon intentionally got herself hit by a car to lose the child she didn't want. And since that event, Jong-won began to feel the desire to break free from Seo-yeon. In fact, he would have preferred if only his child had survived rather than Seo-yeon. Jong-won's story ended there. Their conversation shifted to Tae-song, who had been detained in a mental hospital and imprisoned after his actions toward In-ji. His criminal record is quite extensive. In-ji even mentioned that Tae-song once broke an employee's neck right in front of her while trying to chase her. In-ji had reported Tae-song's terrifying actions to the police many times. To ensure her safety, she even installed a tracker in her own watch. Naturally, hearing those stories, Jong-won was worried that something might happen to In-ji. He didn't want In-ji to get hurt, because Jong-won had indeed begun to develop feelings for her. Jong-won wanted to provide a bodyguard for In-ji, but In-ji refused, because previously, the bodyguard assigned to her was the one whose neck Tae-song had broken. In-ji didn't want such things to happen again. According to In-ji, Tae-song is actually only dangerous to the people around In-ji herself, because he wants to claim that In-ji belongs only to him, so no one else is allowed or able to have her. There is no other way to deal with Tae-song. Even if he is imprisoned, it will only delay his actions before he is eventually released and seeks revenge. Seo-yeon, who also received threats from Tae-song, began to feel frightened and anxious. She was annoyed with her condition at the time and needed an outlet. So, with Yoon-jo's help, even though her body was still weak, Seo-yeon left her ward and visited Jong-won's father, who was still lying unconscious in his room. Her anger was finally vented on Jong-won's father, who, when he was healthy, often said terrible things and frequently insulted Seo-yeon. She slapped Jong-won's father's face repeatedly, until his eyes finally opened. Seo-yeon was naturally shocked. She immediately called the doctor right then and there. However, the doctor said that it was only a temporary response, as Jong-won's father was actually still unconscious. It seemed he didn't have much time left to live. So Jong-won was summoned to see his father before he passed away. The next day, just as expected, Jong-won's father, who had been in a coma for a long time, finally passed away. Immediately after, a funeral ceremony was held, according to his father's own request. He did not want any condolence money at the funeral service. Seo-yeon attended the ceremony as well, accompanying Jong-won, who did not expect her presence there at all. Instead, he was hoping for In-ji to be by his side, because to him, the only person who understands him now is In-ji. Unfortunately, due to the rules in their marriage contract, In-ji cannot appear at formal events like this funeral. However, In-ji promised that she would appear if Jong-won truly needed her. After helping Jong-won put on his tie, In-ji ultimately chose to wait in another room. Jong-won had to perform his duty, receiving his father's guests politely and facing Seo-yeon. In reality, In-ji did not stay idle. She knew that Jong-won was uncomfortable with Seo-yeon's presence at his father's funeral. So when Seo-yeon went to the hospital area, In-ji spoke up and told Seo-yeon to leave. She would not let Seo-yeon or anyone else ruin Jong-won's happiness and life. According to her, Jong-won also deserves to be happy, and as long as they are bound by the marriage contract, In-ji will strive to ensure that happiness for him. In-ji and Seo-yeon almost got into a fight, but eventually In-ji won the argument and asked Seo-yeon to stop disturbing Jong-won's life if she didn't want her secrets revealed. Seo-yeon left, allowing In-ji to replace her in accompanying Jong-won to welcome the guests. She didn't care much about the marriage contract specifically for today, reasoning that she was on leave. Towards evening, they finally left the funeral home. Jong-won invited In-ji to have fun and enjoy her day off. They ended up going to watch a movie together and then walked around spending the night together. The two of them briefly discussed Do-ha. Because of this time spent together, they finally became closer. At that moment, Jong-won indeed truly began to like In-ji. He even thought about the possibility of having In-ji. Jong-won asked then if In-ji was still waiting for Do-ha, the man she had loved for a long time, but In-ji did not answer anything. Even after that, Jong-won said that perhaps he would not let In-ji go again, if In-ji allowed him to open his heart. In-ji did not answer. She just remained silent, confused about how to respond. The next day, at the culmination of Jong-won's father's funeral, after the procession of scattering the ashes in the funeral home corridor, Seo-yeon suddenly arrived accompanied by Yoon-jo to meet Jong-won and In-ji. However, suddenly right there, Seo-yeon demanded that Jong-won immediately divorce In-ji. The story flashes back slightly to 2 years ago. In-ji, who was buying a trunk, accidentally met Jong-won and Seo-yeon in the same store. It turns out that Jong-won had noticed In-ji's presence since that time, and even briefly chased after her back to the present. Seo-yeon demanded that Jong-won and In-ji divorce. This shocked Jong-won more. For some reason, he began to worry about separating from In-ji. That night, Jong-won could not sleep, and almost took the blue pill given by Seo-yeon, a pill that might cause him to hallucinate and detach from reality. Realizing Jong-won's restlessness, In-ji finally let him sleep in the bed that night. Jong-won briefly imagined what it would be like if the two of them could live together for much longer without being disturbed by anyone. That beauty ended when Jong-won realized that he had a nightmare about trying to kill In-ji in his sleep. The next day, early in the morning, In-ji had already left the house after meeting with In-young, who brought news that Do-ha had disappeared from the tracking radar. And suddenly, a message appeared from Si-jong containing a video showing that someone had secretly entered her apartment and killed the fish In-ji was keeping. During that time, Jong-won, who was distressed by his nightmare the night before, was seen calling In-ji, asking about her condition. He was locking himself in the bathroom during the call until In-ji ended the call after saying she was fine and just had other business. Then, In-ji entered her apartment, accompanied by Si-jong. They still didn't know who the man was who entered and poisoned the fish. However, for some reason, In-ji thought that Jong-won was the one who did it. On the same day that In-ji and Si-jong were still wondering who had boldly entered In-ji's apartment, elsewhere, Jong-won met with Tae-sung. They discussed Do-ha and In-ji's devastation after Do-ha's departure, which left many problems behind. In-ji was very strong in facing everything alone, which is what made Tae-sung worship her so much. After that meeting, Jong-won became increasingly unwilling to leave In-ji. He even got angry at Seo-yeon, who forced him to divorce In-ji immediately. In the midst of this situation, Seo-yeon seemed to have no one left. Yoon-jo didn't even want to side with her anymore and chose to help In-ji reveal that all this time Seo-yeon had been spying on Jong-won's life through the new chandelier in his house that had been fitted with a CCTV. In-ji's suspicion about the light turned out to be true. She is now confused about how to tell Jong-won about the light, because In-ji doesn't want Jong-won to become anxious again in his own home. That night when Jong-won fell asleep, In-ji secretly used his phone to send a message to Seo-yeon, pretending to be Jong-won. She finally invited Seo-yeon to meet. At the meeting, In-ji threatened Seo-yeon not to disturb Jong-won anymore or force him to divorce, because In-ji would stay with Jong-won. Furthermore, In-ji also firmly told Seo-yeon not to give Jong-won any more drug-like medications that could cause addiction. That threat certainly made Seo-yeon annoyed. She attacked In-ji in a narrow construction elevator, so the two of them finally fought there. Inji insisted on delivering the threat so that Seo-yeon would not disturb or ruin Jungwon's life again. After that long day, Jungwon seemed to be waiting for Inji to come home in front of the house. Ever since realizing his feelings for Inji, Jungwon has indeed always worried about her. They both decided to have dinner together at a fast food restaurant. There, Jungwon expressed his feelings of missing Inji, making Inji confused again about how to respond. But eventually, Inji reciprocated the expression of missing him. Finally, the two of them are now more honest about their feelings, expressing that they like each other. They spend more time together. Jungwon even happily goes to accompany Inji to exercise. If Seo-yeon knew about this, she definitely wouldn't like it. She still hopes Jungwon stays with her. Not because Seo-yeon still loves Jungwon, but because she still wants to control Jungwon. Unfortunately, lately, it seems like the world is no longer on Seo-yeon's side. Even when she simply wanted to meet Jungwon, Tae-song blocked her way. The incident annoyed her, and she intended to hurt Tae-song with a cutter. This could actually lead to Seo-yeon being accused of killing Tae-song later, once the police investigate the case. The problem is, Seo-yeon was not the only one annoyed by Tae-song. Even Jungwon's emotions were provoked, as Tae-song kept bringing up Inji's past with Do-ha. Furthermore, Tae-song also hinted to Jungwon, if Tae-song could not have Inji, he would make Inji disappear so that no one else could have her. That statement could have driven Jungwon to kill Tae-song out of concern for Inji's safety. However, Jungwon did not do that. Tae-song was still roaming free. He even tried to break into Inji's old apartment again, but it turned out Do-ha was there, and he stabbed Tae-song once in the thigh. That is the wound that the police would later investigate on Tae-song's corpse. When Inji saw blood splattered in her old apartment, she was shocked. Hesitantly, she opened the apartment door, which was not closed tightly. Then, the story shifts to the past, recounting memories from when Inji was still in school. It turns out she once met Jungwon at his school just before his graduation. At that time, Inji's closest friend had recently passed away, and at the same time, Jungwon's mother had also just died. They were both grieving back then. Although they did not know each other, they both showed concern for one another in a slightly unique way. Back to the present. Inji, having entered the apartment, found a bloody fruit knife on the dining table. There was a half-peeled apple on the table. The knife bore the initials DH, referring to Do-ha. Amidst Inji's anxiety, she worried that Do-ha had returned and then been killed by Tae-song, or that other bad things had happened. But suddenly, Inji was surprised by the arrival of Jungwon, who was looking for her after receiving a death threat against Inji from Tae-song. However, instead of being happy about Jungwon's arrival at that moment, his presence actually made Inji angry because she felt Jungwon had interfered in her private life, which was something that violated their marriage contract. Inji's very harsh words when she was angry and her act of kicking him out certainly hurt Jungwon. Jungwon then left with a sad look on his face. Meanwhile, outside the apartment, Do-ha, who had indeed returned, turned out to want revenge on Tae-song, who had spread rumors and videos claiming Do-ha was bisexual. His obsession with Inji made Tae-song heartless enough to destroy Do-ha's and Inji's lives as well. So now Do-ha is back, perhaps to kill Tae-song and then disappear from Inji's life again. However, Do-ha did not kill him right away that night. He let Tae-song escape and immediately returned to the apartment. Unfortunately, Inji was no longer at the apartment. She returned to Jungwon's house, but because Jungwon was still angry with her, Inji decided to go to In-young's place, whose pregnancy was now advanced. She stopped being an informant and intended to focus on taking care of her child. Jungwon was still angry the next day because he could not accept that Inji snapped at him and kicked him out. Actually, that anger was also well-founded. Jungwon was too worried about Inji's safety. Even for Inji's sake, he was willing to install CCTVs inside and around his house to ensure Inji remained safe. Elsewhere, Inji appeared confused about herself and certainly her own feelings, because she thought she should be happy that the man she had loved for years, Do-ha, had returned to her life. And that was the thing she had been waiting for these past 5 years. But it turned out she also couldn't lie to her feelings that she thought more about Young-won than Do-ha, and now her feelings were stronger for Jung-won. Her conversation with Si-jong, who tried to convince In-ji that her feelings had already chosen Jung-won, was ignored. In-ji insisted that she would leave Jung-won after the contract ended, even though Jung-won would never leave her, no matter how hard people tried to separate them or how terrible Seo-yeon's threats were. Once night arrived, Jung-won and In-ji finally had a chance to talk about their fake marriage. Jung-won wondered if In-ji would return to Do-ha after their contract ended. In-ji asked the same thing, whether Jung-won would decide to return to his former wife, Seo-yeon, after they separated. The next day, In-ji met Do-ha directly at the apartment. There, In-ji intended to discuss their past and resolve it that very day. Initially, they blamed each other for the events in the past, but eventually the two of them, who had indeed been separated for a long time, decided it was better to truly end their relationship and their marriage that day, forgetting all the happiness they had shared together. Because in reality, looking back now, everything was just a painful memory. Do-ha also wanted to live his life without the shadow of fear or guilt for having been with In-ji in the past. Although the separation was difficult for In-ji, she could now feel relieved. She did not need to wait for Do-ha any longer. Besides, she now had a new man she loved who would always wait for and worry about her when she didn't come home, and that was Jung-won. Jung-won waited at the bus stop until In-ji came home and cried in front of him. In-ji was happy to see that Jung-won was always there for her. The problem was, lately a new threat had arisen for them. Tae-song was now targeting Jung-won after he no longer dared to touch Do-ha and fled after killing a pharmacist who saw him injured. An informant from NM told In-ji that the man kept following Jung-won. Of course, this would threaten In-ji and Jung-won's marriage contract, because if there is a threat endangering the client, then In-ji will be separated from Jung-won. Once, In-ji got a chance to speak with Tae-song through Jung-won's phone. She planned a meeting with her stalker at a cafe. Tae-song apparently planned to expose Jung-won and In-ji's fake marriage, but when he wanted to retrieve the contract, which he thought was in the apartment, Tae-song instead met Do-ha, and there he was stabbed. He told In-ji about the murder he had committed, making In-ji worried and deciding to leave Tae-song immediately. In-ji's action certainly made Tae-song very sad because he thought In-ji hated him so much that she constantly rejected his presence. Tae-song then followed In-ji to Jung-won's office just to hear the answer as to why In-ji could hate him so much. In-ji was terrified when Tae-song would not let her go. Fortunately, at that moment, Jung-won saw them, and right then, Jung-won immediately beat Tae-song to save In-ji. He only stopped when In-ji asked him to step away. Since then, In-ji began to fear Jung-won, thinking that he could also become as terrifying as Tae-song, killing others for In-ji's sake. That situation drove In-ji to resign from her job. She said that after her marriage contract with Jung-won was finished, she would quit. In-ji's friend, Lee Seon, asked the reason why In-ji was resigning. Initially, she thought In-ji resigned because Do-ha had returned. But it turned out In-ji gave another reason. In-ji said that she no longer had the proper capacity for the job because Tae-song's presence could endanger her clients. Although Lee Seon said she would try to handle the threat from Tae-song, In-ji remained firm in her decision to resign. Curious, Lee Seon finally asked Do-dam directly who had been her secret informant all along. Do-dam opined that In-ji most likely had feelings for Jung-won because she was now completely free from her relationship with Do-ha. After this incident on the same day, Jung-won was informed by his manager that there was a secret CCTV in the light installed in his house. Jung-won was convinced that this was Seo-yeon's doing. So angrily, he went to see his ex, who had already been informed by Yoon-jo that Jung-won had found out about her malicious action. While Jung-won was dealing with Seo-yeon, he learned that In-ji had also been aware of the CCTV's existence for a long time. At the same time, In-ji was calming herself on a kayak in the lake she usually visited. That lake would later become the silent witness to Tae-song's death. In-ji would be questioned regarding the death of the man whose body was found in the lake. Inji was suspected because the police assessed her as the person who most wanted Tae-song dead, and who had the strongest motive for murder among the other people involved with Tae-song. Actually, that night, after Jong-won found out about the secret CCTV in his light, he decided to destroy the light. At that moment, Jong-won recalled a memory from when he was a child. Back then, he helped his mother end her life because she could no longer endure the torture inflicted by his father. After his mother's death, Jong-won ran out of the house and met Seo-yeon for the first time, who offered him drug pills to calm him down. Eventually, he became dependent on those pills. The night after the CCTV was destroyed, Seo-yeon visited him again in the pouring rain. She said that after everything that happened, she hoped Jong-won would return to her. Of course, Jong-won did not want that. He ignored Seo-yeon. The rain outside got heavier, but Jong-won chose to walk through the streets alone. Inji came to pick him up after finding the shattered light at home. She was sure Jong-won must be distressed. So, after successfully finding Jong-won on the street, Inji did not immediately take him home. They eventually went to a resort by the lake and spent time together there. Winter was almost arriving, meaning their contract marriage period would soon end. But of course, Inji could not lie to her feelings. She felt that her feelings for Jong-won were growing stronger, especially when Jong-won revealed that he had actually known and watched Inji for a long time. And certainly, in her heart, Inji hoped to stay with Jong-won a little longer. But of course, Inji felt this was wrong. Because of that, she finally asked Jong-won for an immediate divorce, because she thought and said that she had failed in carrying out this contract marriage. Because in reality, this marriage was not just a contract. Inji had crossed the line, which was the boundary of feelings. She already had feelings for Jong-won. Naturally, Jong-won did not want to do that, because in reality, Jong-won also had feelings for Inji, and he did not want to lose her. If Inji had indeed developed feelings, Jong-won preferred to stay with Inji, regardless of the contract marriage they were undergoing. However, Inji remained firm in her actions and decision. There was nothing Jong-won could do to keep Inji in his life, because Inji insisted on leaving, because Inji thought they would both be happier if they were not truly together. That day, Inji truly disappeared from Jong-won's life. She was never seen in Jong-won's life again. She also never went to the places she usually visited. Naturally, Jong-won searched for her everywhere, even to the apartment that was now abandoned, because Jong-won felt he could not lose Inji. He had already fallen in love with her. Jong-won even met Do-dam to ask where Inji was, but she did not know where she went. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Tae-song secretly sneaked into Jong-won's house when the light replacement was taking place. He stole the trunk that would later become evidence of the murder. Because at that time, Tae-song thought he would reveal Jong-won and Inji's marriage contract, believing it was inside that trunk. Then Lee Seon contacted Jong-won on the same day to say that his marriage contract with Inji had expired, and she did not mind if Jong-won wanted to file for a penalty fee. But Jong-won did not care about the money. He thought he only wanted to know where Inji was, because he wanted to explain something and he could not lose Inji now. And if possible, he wanted to speak with Inji for the last time. Actually, all this time Inji was at that company, but she intentionally did not want to speak to Jong-won. The reason why Inji decided to leave Jong-won was not because she did not love him. She actually loved him very much. But she was worried about Jong-won's safety, because she knew Tae-song, the crazy man chasing her, would do anything to harm Jong-won. And she feared that if she was with Jong-won, his life would be in danger. Because of that, the best choice was to leave Jong-won. And sure enough, Tae-song suddenly called Inji to inform her about the stolen trunk. It was the wrong trunk, because the one he took was Jong-won's trunk, not Inji's. At that time, Inji, who was too worried, finally agreed to meet Tae-song again in order to resolve their problem. At the same time, Yoon-jo found Seo-yeon trying to end her life. He immediately rushed her to the hospital and contacted Jong-won. Yoon-jo, who turned out to also love Seo-yeon, asked Jong-won to let Seo-yeon stay with him at the house, at least for some time. Jong-won, feeling pity, naturally agreed. But he continued to ignore Seo-yeon when at home, because he was still too busy looking for In-ji's whereabouts. Then, In-ji recklessly met Tae-sung alone in a deserted meadow. She wanted to end everything. Only Si-jong knew about this plan, even though Si-jong had forbidden In-ji from acting carelessly like that. In-ji actually did not intend to kill Tae-sung, she just wanted Tae-sung gone from her life. Before the conversation continued, Tae-sung sent a message to Jong-won to tell him that In-ji was with him and to lure him to come. While Jong-won was on his way, In-ji realized that the trunk brought by Tae-sung was Jong-won's trunk, which looked similar to hers. She tried to find an excuse to leave that place without having to open the trunk, because indeed she did not know the code to Jong-won's trunk. Tae-sung was furious then. In-ji decided to ask Tae-sung to die together, but Tae-sung refused because he wanted to kill Jong-won first. Coincidentally, Jong-won arrived there at that moment and immediately got into a fight with Tae-sung. Tae-sung tried to kill Jong-won by stabbing him with a knife he possessed. In-ji naturally panicked and immediately grabbed the gun she had stolen from Jong-won's house. And then she shot Tae-sung. But the gun was actually empty, so Tae-sung was not injured at all. After shooting at Tae-sung, In-ji aimed the gun at her own head. Fortunately, Jong-won managed to stop her. In-ji's attempt was thwarted. Tae-sung, who did not die that night, instead escaped with the trunk using a boat, heading to the middle of the lake. That night, In-ji naturally looked very despairing. She felt her entire life was ruined because of the man who was overly obsessed with her, Tae-sung. In-ji wanted everything to end. So In-ji decided to leave Jong-won's life, no matter what happened. Elsewhere, Tae-sung was indeed killed in the middle of the lake. He did not die from In-ji's gunshot, but rather died at the hands of Yoon-jo, who was tasked by Lee Seon to kill Tae-sung. After all, Yoon-jo had been harboring a grudge against Tae-sung, who had killed his brother while he was serving as In-ji's bodyguard. Yoon-jo then returned to Seo-yeon's house and confessed to the murder he had committed. Although Seo-yeon said that night that she decided to get back together with Yoon-jo, Yoon-jo had to flee. Not long after the murder, Seo-yeon was questioned. She was shown a photo of a stab wound, which Seo-yeon actually knew was caused by Yoon-jo's blade, but she pretended not to know anything about it. Jong-won's trunk, which turned out to have been given to Seo-yeon while they were still married, was returned, the same trunk that Tae-sung had carried before his death. The trunk contained baby clothes and supplies that Jong-won and Seo-yeon had prepared for their child, who eventually passed away. Seo-yeon wept upon seeing it. A few days later, In-ji was also proven innocent of Tae-sung's death. However, at that time, In-ji still decided to end her contract marriage with Jong-won. She wanted to leave Jong-won's life because she felt he might be happier without her. She said goodbye to Jong-won, who was planning to renovate his house at the time. Before she left, Jong-won told In-ji that if they were destined to meet a second time, he wanted them to start a new introduction, and Jong-won wanted the chance to be with In-ji for much longer. Time passed since that tragic day. Yoon-jo, who was charged with the murder he committed, was naturally arrested by the police. Seo-yeon wanted to protect him by hiring the best lawyer, because Yoon-jo loved Seo-yeon and she loved him back. Seo-yeon planned to live with Yoon-jo once he finished serving his prison sentence. Seo-yeon also let go of being with Jong-won and wished for his happiness. Meanwhile, Jong-won began his new life. He's happier now. He has started to forget his trauma and has now renovated his house beautifully. He's also not lonely, as he no longer lives alone. He is accompanied by 2 cats he adopted to keep him company. On the other hand, In-ji also began to put her life in order. She is now living a better life and raising a dog. Even so, she constantly thinks of Jong-won because she cannot forget her love for him. When she watches movies at the cinema, she is reminded of Jong-won again. Until one day, In-ji intended to sell her trunk, which looked similar to Jong-won's. On that day, she accidentally saw Jong-won across the street. But Inji decided not to greet him. However, for some reason, fate seemed to be trying to unite them, because it was Jong-won who finally spotted Inji and immediately chased after her. Jong-won reminded her of what he had said in the past. If fate brought him together with Inji again, he wanted to get to know her better and start their relationship fresh as new people, because he wants to be with Inji. And that is the ending of this drama. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tune in for the next video.